Welcome back, everybody. If you enjoyed today's content, you can find more like it on Pulse Fundamentals on YouTube. All right, today we're diving into Trump versus the EU and the EU's response to Trump's Greenland threat, specifically the upcoming inauguration and the tension surrounding it.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is a pretty complicated situation with Trump's comments about acquiring Greenland. And by the way, this isn't the first time he's brought this up, but they're definitely causing a lot of anxiety both in Europe and Denmark.
And it seems like his, interest in acquiring Greenland is closely tied to national security for the United States. At least that's what he says. He's mentioned Greenland's location being strategic and, all the resources that could be there, oil, gas, rare earth elements, you name it.
Right. And you also have Greenland's Prime Minister Mutby Igasgujid. He's made it very clear that Greenlanders want to decide their own fate. They're pushing for independence from Denmark, and they have stated that they don't want to be American or Danish. They want to be Greenlanders.
And then you have Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, who's acknowledged the anxiety, obviously, that Trump's comments have caused, but she's also emphasized that Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders. So where does that leave the EU in all of this?
Well, the European Commission has been walking on eggshells in their response. They've really emphasized respect for state sovereignty and have avoided directly condemning Trump.
It does make you wonder if their response is a bit weak, considering what could happen. You have this powerful nation, the U.S., making these territorial claims. It's a bit unsettling.
Yeah, some people definitely think that the EU is in a tough spot. They're trying not to escalate things with the U.S., but they also have to, uphold international law and territorial integrity. It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
And this is all happening as we're approaching Trump's second inauguration. And on top of everything else, it's been reported that the European Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen, hasn't even been invited.
Yeah, that's a big deal, especially because it seems like invitations have gone out to other world leaders. We're talking about the Chinese president, the former Brazilian president, the Israeli prime minister, the Italian prime minister. They've all reportedly been invited.
And then there's the whole thing with Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr. He was recently in Greenland and was even seen giving out those MJA hats to the locals.
Oh, yeah. And there were also reports in the Danish media outlet DR about an incident where Trump's team allegedly encouraged homeless people and others who were struggling to wear those MJA hats for a video in exchange for a free meal. This whole situation, with Trump's comments on Greenland and then von der Leyen not being invited to the inauguration, has got some people wondering about the future of the U.S. and EU relationship under a second Trump presidency.
Yeah, especially with the Arctic becoming a bigger and bigger deal on the world stage. You've got Russia, China, other countries all vying for influence there.
Right. And Greenland's location in the Arctic makes it a key player. Plus, it's full of those natural resources, oil, gas, rare earth elements, the one.
And climate change is making those resources easier to get to. So that makes Greenland even more appealing from an economic standpoint. And, of course, the U.S. already has that Air Force base there under the 1951 treaty with Denmark.
So Trump's comments aren't just about getting more land. It's about securing those strategic interests the U.S. already has up there.
Bringing it back to the EU, though, their response, or I guess lack of a strong response, is pretty telling about their situation, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, they're trying to walk a tightrope here, trying to keep a good relationship with the U.S., which is important to them for a lot of reasons, but they also have to, stick to their principles when it comes to international law and protecting Denmark, a member state. Some people think the EU should be way more forceful, even considering sanctions against the U.S. if Trump actually tries to take over Greenland.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out at the inauguration and beyond.
Yeah.
What do you think will happen?
Well, if we look at the bigger picture, we've got Russia taking over Crimea, the conflict in Ukraine, China being more assertive in the South China Sea. Trump saying he wants Greenland, even if he doesn't actually do anything, could encourage other countries to go after land they want.
So you're saying that if the U.S., a country that's supposed to stand up for democracy and international rules starts breaking those rules, it could set a bad example.
Exactly. And that's why what the EU does or doesn't do is so important. If they don't take a stand now, what kind of message does that send to other countries who might be thinking about doing something similar?
Yeah, it's a tough spot for them to be in.
For sure. They have to weigh the possible damage to their relationship with the U.S. against sticking up for international law and their member states. It's a delicate balance.
Well, everyone will definitely be watching to see what the EU does. What happens with Greenland could have big consequences for the U.S. and EU, the Arctic, and even the whole world order. There's definitely a lot to think about here. This whole Greenland situation really shows you how complicated things are getting out there on the world stage. I mean, you've got these competing interests and all these long-standing alliances, And then you have these really strong statements and actions that seem to go against, how countries are supposed to treat each other.
Yeah, and what I find really interesting is how this is forcing the EU to rethink their relationship with the US now that Trump is going into a second term. They have to make some tough decisions about, what matters most to them, and those decisions could have a huge impact down the line.
It really makes you think about what it means to be a leader in the world today.
Mhm.
I mean, is it more important to stick with those old partnerships no matter what? Or is it about standing up for what's right, even if it means putting those relationships at risk?
Those are some really tough questions, and there aren't any easy answers.
Hmm.
But I think this whole thing with Greenland and how the EU decides to handle it will tell us a lot about how the balance of power is shifting in the world and how things might play out in the years to come.
And it all comes back to the question of what kind of world we want to live in,
Mhm.
right? Do we want a world where it's all about power and whoever's strongest gets what they want, even if it means using force? Or do we want a world where countries respect international law and try to work things out through diplomacy and cooperation?
Yeah, the situation with Greenland and the EU's response, it's like a smaller version of that bigger debate playing out on a global scale. And the outcome affects all of us. It reminds us that the choices we make individually and as a whole are going to shape the future of our world.
It's definitely something to keep in mind as we watch this all unfold. Well, thanks for talking about all of this with us today. And for everyone listening, we hope this has given you some things to think about. Don't forget to subscribe to Pell's Fundamentals on YouTube for more content like this, and we'll catch you next time.